Captain Zethkar had seen many species across the galaxy during his 40 cycles of service with the Galactic Commerce Federation. He had negotiated with the crystalline Vorthon, whose bodies sang in harmonic frequencies that could shatter steel. He had traded with the gas-dwelling Nephilim, who existed as living clouds of sentient vapor. He had even survived first contact with the territorial Krex, whose idea of diplomacy involved ritual combat with plasma weapons, but nothing had prepared him for humans. The species had only recently achieved faster-than-light travel, a mere 50 of their years ago. In galactic terms, they were infants, barely crawling out of their home system. Most species took centuries to develop the technology and wisdom necessary for interstellar civilization. The humans had done it in what amounted to a cosmic blink of an eye. Zethkar stood on the bridge of his flagship, the merchant vessel Prosperity's Edge, watching the blue-green world of Earth grow larger on the main display. His forearms worked the control panels with practiced efficiency, while his secondary brain processed the cultural briefings his crew had prepared. Humans were supposedly simple creatures, bipedal, carbon-based, with a single brain and primitive sensory organs. They had managed to develop nuclear weapons before they even left their planet, which most xenobiologists considered either remarkably stupid or terrifyingly efficient. The Federation's interest in humanity was purely economic. Earth possessed rare minerals that were essential for quantum drive manufacturing, and the humans seemed eager to trade. They offered their resources in exchange for technology, medicine, and knowledge about the greater galaxy. It was a standard arrangement that Zethkar had overseen dozens of times with newly contacted species. What made this mission different was his passenger. Lord Vexatai of the Hegemony sat in the guest quarters, his serpentine form coiled around a specially designed chair. The Hegemony was one of the oldest and most powerful civilizations in the galaxy, with technology that bordered on the mystical. They rarely involved themselves in first-contact situations, preferring to let the Federation handle the messy details of integrating new species into galactic society. But Vextai had insisted on accompanying this mission. He claimed the Hegemony had a special interest in human biology, something about their rapid adaptability and unusual neural patterns. Zethkar didn't ask too many questions. The Hegemony paid well for passage, and their credits were always good. The communication array chirped, indicating an incoming transmission from Earth. Zethkar accepted the signal, and the main screen flickered to show a human face. The creature had pale skin, short brown hair, and those unsettling binocular eyes that seemed to focus with predatory intensity. Despite reading about human appearance in the briefings, seeing one in person was still jarring. "This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the United Earth Defense Force," the humans said in their strange, melodic language. The universal translator rendered her words into proper galactic standard. "Welcome to our system, Captain Zethkar. We have prepared landing coordinates for your diplomatic mission." Zethkar activated his own communication array. "Greetings, Admiral Chen. We appreciate your hospitality and look forward to establishing formal trade relations between Earth and the Federation." The human's facial features shifted in what the briefings identified as a smile, though it looked more like a threat display to Zethkar. "We've prepared a reception for you at our United Nations headquarters in New York. Our scientists are very excited to meet representatives of galactic civilization." As the transmission ended, Zethkar felt a subtle vibration through the ship's hull. His sensory organs detected the familiar energy signature of a Hegemony stealth vessel decloaking nearby. So Vextai hadn't come alone. The merchant captain made a note to increase his fee for this mission. Hegemony politics always meant complications. The landing proceeded smoothly. Earth's orbital traffic control was primitive but functional, guiding them to a designated landing site outside the human city. Zethkar was impressed by the efficiency of their procedures, even if their technology was several centuries behind galactic standards. As they descended through the atmosphere, Zethkar got his first real look at human civilization. Their cities sprawled across the landscape in organic patterns, unlike the geometric precision of most advanced species. Green spaces were integrated throughout their urban areas, suggesting they still maintained a connection to their natural environment. Most species abandoned such sentimentality once they achieved spaceflight. The landing site was a carefully prepared area surrounded by human military vehicles. Soldiers in primitive armor stood at attention, their projectile weapons held ready but not aimed directly at the ship. It was a respectful show of force, acknowledging both their desire for peaceful contact and their readiness to defend themselves if necessary. Zethkar appreciated the balance. Too many species were either completely trusting or utterly paranoid during first contact. The humans seemed to have found a middle ground that suggested both wisdom and strength. As the ship's systems powered down, Vexatai slithered onto the bridge. His scales shifted color in patterns that indicated excitement, though Zethkar wasn't entirely sure what the Hegemony Lord was excited about. "Fascinating creatures," Vexatai hissed, his forked tongue tasting the recycled air. "Their biosignatures are even more intriguing in person." "They seem competent enough," Zethkar replied, checking the environmental readings. Earth's atmosphere was within acceptable parameters for both their species, though he would still recommend breathing apparatus as a precaution. "Primitive, but competent." "Oh, my dear Captain," Vextai's scales rippled in what passed for amusement among his kind. "You have no idea what these humans are truly capable of. The Hegemony has been monitoring their development for some time. They are far more dangerous than they appear." Before Zethkar could ask what he meant, the ship's communication array activated again. This time, the transmission came from the cloaked Hegemony vessel. The screen showed another serpentine figure, though this one wore the ceremonial scars of the Hegemony military. "Lord Vextai," the figure spoke in the sibilant Hegemony language, "the collection operation is complete. We have secured specimens as requested." Zethkar's 4 hearts nearly stopped beating. Specimens. The Federation had strict protocols against unauthorized biological sampling of sentient species. It was considered an act of war by most civilizations, and for good reason. If the Hegemony had taken human specimens without permission. "Excellent work, Commander Sixtel," Vextai replied, his scales now shifting to patterns that indicated deep satisfaction. "How many subjects did you acquire?" 12, my lord. All juvenile specimens as requested. They were obtained from a population center called Denver during their night cycle. No adult humans detected our presence." The words hit Zethkar like a plasma bolt to the chest. Juvenile specimens. They had taken human children. He turned to stare at Vextai, his translator struggling to process the magnitude of what he had just heard. "You kidnapped their young?" Vexatai's head turned toward him with that unsettling serpentine grace. "Such a crude way of putting it, Captain. We simply acquired research subjects. The Hegemony requires detailed biological data on human neural development. Their young provide the most valuable information." "This is madness," Zethkar whispered, his 4 arms trembling with a combination of fear and rage. "Do you have any idea what you've done? Taking the offspring of a sentient species is the highest form of war crime recognized by galactic law." "Galactic law applies to recognized species," Vextai replied dismissively. "Humans have not yet been granted full membership in any galactic organization. They exist in a legal gray area that the Hegemony is prepared to exploit." As if summoned by their conversation, the communication array activated once more. Admiral Chen's face appeared on the screen, but her expression had changed dramatically. The polite smile was gone, replaced by something cold and terrible. Her binocular eyes seemed to burn with an inner fire that made Zethkar's scales crawl. "Captain Zethkar," she said, and her voice carried a tone that the universal translator struggled to convey properly. "We need to discuss a situation that has developed. 12 of our children have gone missing from Denver. Our satellite networks detected an energy signature consistent with cloaked vessel operations in that area approximately 2 hours ago." The human paused, and when she continued, her voice had dropped to barely above a whisper. "I'm going to ask you a direct question, Captain, and I strongly advise you to answer truthfully. Do you or your associates have our children?" Zethkar looked at Vextai, who was watching the screen with what could only be described as scientific curiosity. The Hegemony Lord made no effort to respond, apparently content to let the merchant captain handle the situation. "Admiral Chen," Zethkar began, his voice cracking slightly, "I can personally assure you that my ship and crew had nothing to do with the disappearance of your young. However," he paused, knowing that his next words would likely doom them all, "my passenger may have information relevant to your inquiry." The human's eyes seemed to focus with laser-like intensity. "Put him on screen, now." Vextai slithered forward, his scales shifting to patterns of amusement. "Greetings, primitive creature. I am Lord Vextai of the Hegemony. Yes, we have taken some of your offspring for research purposes. They are quite safe, I assure you, though they will be undergoing extensive neural mapping procedures." The silence that followed was perhaps the most terrifying thing Zethkar had ever experienced. Admiral Chen's face went completely blank, as if all emotion had been simply switched off. When she finally spoke, her voice was so quiet that the ship's audio systems had to amplify it to audible levels. "You took our children." It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact, delivered with the kind of absolute certainty that spoke of terrible consequences to come. "For scientific research, yes," Vextai continued, apparently oblivious to the danger he was courting. "Human neural development is quite fascinating. Your species shows remarkable adaptability that we wish to study and potentially replicate." Admiral Chen closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them again, Zethkar saw something that made his secondary brain freeze in terror. He had seen predators before, apex hunters from a dozen worlds that could kill with casual efficiency. But this human female carried something different in her gaze. This wasn't the look of a predator hunting for food or territory. This was the look of a parent whose children had been threatened. "Captain Zethkar," she said, her voice now carrying an edge that could cut through battle armor, "I suggest you distance yourself and your crew from your passenger immediately. You have exactly 1 hour to return our children unharmed to the landing site. If even one of them has been injured in any way, I will demonstrate why humans developed nuclear weapons before we learned to leave our planet." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in absolute silence. Vexitai's scales shifted to patterns indicating confusion. "Interesting response. More aggressive than our psychological profiles predicted. No matter. The research vessel is already beyond their primitive weapons range." Zethkar stared at the blank screen, his 4 hearts beating in syncopated terror. "You magnificent fool," he whispered. "You have no idea what you've just awakened." The first sign that something had gone catastrophically wrong came exactly 37 minutes after Admiral Chen's ultimatum. Zethkar was frantically trying to establish communication with Federation Command when his sensor operator, a nervous Quillen named Rixtor, suddenly went rigid at his station. "Captain," Rixtor's voice carried the distinctive harmonic wobble that indicated extreme stress among his species. "I'm detecting massive energy buildups across the human planet, thousands of signatures." "Elaborate," Zethkar ordered, though he was beginning to suspect he didn't want to know the answer. They appear to be weapon systems, sir, but the energy readings are... Rixtor paused, running the scans again. Sir, some of these signatures are approaching the output levels of Federation cruiser-class plasma cannons. Vextai slithered closer to the sensor station, his scales shifting to patterns of scientific interest. Impossible. Our intelligence indicates that human weapons are primitive chemical propulsion systems, nothing approaching energy weapon technology. Rixtor's harmonics climbed even higher. Sir, I'm also detecting launch signatures, hundreds of them, small craft leaving the planet's surface. The main display flickered to life, showing a tactical overview of Earth's orbital space. What they saw made Zethkar's secondary brain shut down entirely in self-defense. Rising from the planet's surface like angry insects from a disturbed hive were ships, hundreds of them, ranging from small single-pilot fighters to massive vessels that dwarfed Zethkar's merchant cruiser. "How is this possible?" Vextai hissed. "Our surveillance indicated they barely had interplanetary capability." "Your surveillance," Zethkar said quietly, "was apparently inadequate." The communication array activated without any input from the bridge crew. Admiral Chen's face appeared on the screen, but she was no longer in what appeared to be an office. She was now wearing some kind of military armor, and behind her, Zethkar could see what looked like a command center bustling with activity. 22 minutes remaining, Lord Vextai, she said calmly. I thought you might like to see what humanity looks like when you threaten our children. The display split, showing feeds from across Earth. Launch facilities that hadn't existed an hour ago were opening like mechanical flowers across the planet's surface. Massive doors slid apart to reveal weapon systems that made Zethkar's merchant-class defenses look like toys. In Earth's oceans, submarines the size of Federation destroyers were breaching the surface, their hulls bristling with weapons that shouldn't have existed. You see, Lord Vextai, Admiral Chen continued conversationally, humanity has a bit of a trust issue when it comes to first contact. We've spent the last 50 years preparing for the possibility that our new neighbors might not be as friendly as they claimed. On the screen, a massive space station began to unfold from what had appeared to be a simple communications satellite. Weapon arrays deployed with mechanical precision while shield generators hummed to life. Similar transformations were happening throughout Earth's orbital space. This is impossible, Vextai whispered. No species develops this level of military technology without it being detected. Admiral Chen smiled, and Zethkar realized he was seeing a human expression that the briefings had never mentioned. It wasn't the polite diplomatic smile from earlier. This was something predatory and terrifying. Humans are very good at hiding things when we need to, she said. We've had a lot of practice. Wars tend to teach you the value of deception and misdirection. We've been fighting each other for thousands of years, Lord Vextai. We know how to build weapons and we know how to hide them. The tactical display updated again. The human ships weren't just rising from Earth anymore. They were moving with purpose, forming attack formations that spoke of extensive military training and coordination. These weren't hastily assembled militias or desperate defense forces. This was a professional military that had been preparing for exactly this scenario. 15 minutes, Admiral Chen said. I should also mention that we've been monitoring your cloaked vessel since it entered our system. Did you really think we wouldn't notice a ship that size trying to hide near our moon? We've been tracking your every movement. Commander Sixtal's voice suddenly crackled over the communication system, originating from the Hegemony research vessel. Lord Vextai, we are detecting multiple human vessels approaching our position. Their ships are somehow tracking us through our stealth fields. Impossible, Vextai hissed. Hegemony stealth technology is centuries ahead of anything these primitives possess. Admiral Chen's expression didn't change. Lord Vextai, you made a fundamental error in your assessment of humanity. You assumed that because we're new to space travel, we're new to warfare. You're wrong. We've been perfecting the art of killing each other since we climbed down from the trees. Space travel just gave us a bigger battlefield. The main display showed the hegemony research vessel, its cloaking field flickering as human ships surrounded it. The vessels were sleek, predatory things that moved through space with a grace that suggested artificial gravity systems far more advanced than anything in Zethkar's experience. 10 minutes, Admiral Chen said. Your research ship is now surrounded by 12 of our destroyers. Each one carries enough firepower to crack a small moon. I suggest you contact Commander Sixtail and advise him to prepare for boarding. You wouldn't dare attack a hegemony vessel, Vextai sputtered. The political ramifications alone would... Would what? Admiral Chen interrupted. Anger a species that kidnaps children for medical experiments? I think we can live with that particular diplomatic incident. Zethkar watched in fascination as the human ships moved into position around the hegemony vessel. Their formation was perfect, covering every possible escape vector while leaving clear firing lanes for coordinated attack. These weren't primitive barbarians flailing around with crude weapons. This was military precision that rivaled anything the Federation could field. 5 minutes, Admiral Chen said. Oh, and Lord Vextai? You might want to know that we've been recording this entire conversation. Every word you've said about taking our children for research purposes has been transmitted to every human colony, station, and ship in our territory. They're all very interested in discussing your research methods with you. The communication array suddenly lit up with dozens of incoming signals. Human voices filled the bridge, each one carrying the same cold fury that Admiral Chen had displayed. This is Captain Rodriguez of the Mars Defense Force. We've got 6 children missing from New Angeles. You got something to say about that, Snake? Mining Station Series reporting. If you've touched any of our kids, we're going to turn your ship into scrap metal. This is the lunar colony. My daughter was visiting Earth when your people took those children. I want her back, and I want her back now. The voices kept coming, each one adding to a chorus of parental rage that sent chills down Zethkar's spine. He had never heard anything like it before. Individual species could be fierce when protecting their young, but this was something else entirely. This was an entire civilization mobilizing to protect its children. 3 minutes, Admiral Chen said over the growing cacophony. I should mention that our records show 12 children missing. We want 12 children back, all of them healthy, unharmed, and completely unaltered. If your research has damaged any of them in any way, Lord Vextai, we're going to demonstrate just how creative humans can be when properly motivated. Commander Sixtal's voice cut through the other communications, tinged with the first notes of panic Zethkar had ever heard from a hegemony officer. Lord Vextai, the human ships are demanding we lower our shields and prepare for boarding. Their weapon locks are active, and our shields are already being scanned by some kind of penetrating beam technology. How are they penetrating hegemony shields? Vextai demanded. Admiral Chen's smile grew wider. We've had 50 years to study every piece of alien technology that's passed through our system, Lord Vextai. Trade ships, diplomatic vessels, scout craft. We've been very polite about it, but we've been learning. Humans are remarkably good at reverse engineering things we don't understand. The tactical display showed energy readings spiking around the human ships. Whatever they were doing to the hegemony vessel's shields was working. The stealth field was completely gone now, and the defensive barriers were flickering like candles in a hurricane. 2 minutes, Admiral Chen said. Time to make a choice, Lord Vextai. You can return our children voluntarily, or we can come get them. But I should warn you that humans have a particular dislike for people who hurt children. If we have to board your ship, we might not be as gentle as we could be. Zethkar realized that his 4 hands were trembling uncontrollably. In all his years of interspecies commerce, he had never seen anything like this. The humans weren't just angry. They weren't just defending their territory or their resources. They were exhibiting a coordinated response that spoke of preparation, planning, and a fundamental understanding of warfare that contradicted everything the galaxy thought it knew about them. "1 minute," Admiral Chen said. Her voice was still calm, still conversational, but there was something underneath it now that made Zethkar's blood freeze. "Lord Vextai, I'm going to share something with you that might help you understand the situation you've created. Humans have a saying, never get between a mother bear and her cubs. You've just gotten between 8 billion human parents and their children." The human ships around the hegemony vessel suddenly shifted formation. What had been a containment pattern became something else entirely. Zethkar recognized it from his military history studies. It was a formation designed for one purpose: total destruction of the target with maximum efficiency and minimal risk to the attacking force. "Time's up," Admiral Chen said quietly. And then the humans opened fire. The hegemony research vessel lasted exactly 47 seconds. Zethkar watched in stunned silence as the human ships unleashed a coordinated barrage that defied everything he thought he knew about primitive species and their capabilities. The weapons weren't the crude plasma cannons or particle beams he expected. Instead, the humans employed a devastating combination of technologies that spoke of decades of careful study and improvement of galactic standard weapons. The first wave was pure energy, but not the scattered, inefficient blasts that most species produced when they first developed directed energy weapons. These were focused, coherent beams that struck with surgical precision. The hegemony shields, which should have been able to withstand anything a newly spacefaring species could produce, collapsed within seconds. The second wave was something Zethkar had never seen before. The humans launched what appeared to be simple kinetic projectiles. But as they struck the now defenseless hull of the research vessel, they revealed their true nature. Each projectile contained some kind of conversion warhead that turned the target's own armor into plasma. The effect was devastating and terrifying. "Impossible," Vextai whispered, his scales shifting rapidly between patterns of fear and confusion. "Those are theoretical weapons. The energy requirements alone should be beyond their capabilities." Admiral Chen's voice came through the communication array with deadly calm. "We learned about energy efficiency from your own ships, Lord Vextai. 50 years of studying every piece of alien technology that came through our system. We're very good students." The third wave was the most horrifying of all. Instead of destroying the research vessel outright, the human weapons created precise breaches in the hull. Immediately, small craft swarmed through the openings like predatory insects entering a wounded animal. The humans weren't just attacking, they were boarding. "Commander Sixtal!" Vextai called frantically into his communication device. "Report your status!" The response, when it came, was barely recognizable as the voice of the confident hegemony officer who had reported the successful kidnapping just an hour before. They're inside the ship, my lord. The humans, they're not like the intelligence report suggested. They're not just using weapons. They're hunting us through our own corridors." The background noise on the transmission was unlike anything Zethkar had heard before. It wasn't the clean, efficient sounds of military combat that most species produced. This was something primal and terrifying. Human voices echoed through the hegemony ship, calling to each other in their strange language. But underneath the words, there was something else. A sound that spoke of apex predators who had found their prey. "The children," Admiral Chen said from the main display. "Where are they?" Commander Sixtal's response came through clearly, despite the chaos in the background. "Deck 7, Section 12. But you must understand, they are unharmed. We were only conducting non-invasive neural scans." The silence that followed was perhaps the most terrifying moment of Zethkar's entire life. When Admiral Chen spoke again, her voice carried a quality that the universal translator couldn't properly convey. It was something beyond rage, beyond fury. It was the sound of a species that had decided someone needed to die. Non-invasive neural scans, she repeated slowly. On children, without permission, without anesthetic, while they were terrified and alone and calling for their parents. Vextai's scales had gone completely pale, cycling through colors that indicated stress levels approaching biological shutdown. Admiral, you must understand, the hegemony's research protocols are designed to minimize discomfort. Minimize discomfort? The question came not from Admiral Chen, but from one of the other human voices that had been calling in earlier. You kidnapped 12 kids and stuck them in medical scanners, and you think that minimizes discomfort? More voices joined in, creating a chorus of parental rage that made Zethkar's audio receptors physically hurt. These weren't military officers following orders or politicians calculating responses. These were parents who had discovered that their children were in danger. Contact established with the juveniles, came a new voice through the communication system. This one was different, calmer, but carrying an underlying intensity that somehow made it more frightening than the obvious anger. We have visual confirmation of 12 human children, ages ranging from 6 to 14. They appear physically unharmed but are exhibiting signs of severe psychological trauma. Admiral Chen closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them, Zethkar saw something that made him understand why humans had managed to survive and thrive on what was apparently a death world filled with predators. Lord Vextai, she said quietly, you made a mistake that many species have made throughout galactic history. You assumed that because humans are new to space travel, we're new to violence. You thought that because we seem primitive compared to your technology, we would be easy to intimidate or manipulate. The tactical display updated, showing that human ships were now surrounding not just the damaged hegemony research vessel, but also Zethkar's own merchant cruiser. He hadn't even noticed them approaching. The thing is, Admiral Chen continued, humanity spent thousands of years learning how to kill things that were bigger, stronger, and better armed than we were. We hunted creatures that could tear us apart with their bare claws. We fought wars against opponents who had every possible advantage except one. They weren't human. On the display, more human ships were arriving every minute. They came from directions that should have been impossible, emerging from behind asteroids and debris fields where no ship should have been able to hide. The humans had been preparing for this confrontation long before the hegemony had ever entered their system. Children secured, came the report from the boarding party. All 12 are alive and responsive. Medical teams are standing by for immediate evaluation and treatment. The relief in Admiral Chen's voice was palpable, but it didn't soften the underlying steel. Thank you, Marines. Begin extraction procedures. And someone remind Commander Sixtal that he and his crew are now prisoners of war under the Terran Colonial Defense Accords. Prisoners of war? Vextai sputtered. This is preposterous. The hegemony does not recognize primitive species' legal frameworks. Admiral Chen smiled again, and this time Zethkar realized he was seeing the expression that had made humans the apex predator on their world. Lord Vextai, as of approximately 1 hour ago, humanity withdrew from all pending negotiations for Federation membership. We've also declared our independence from any existing galactic legal frameworks. Which means that when it comes to people who kidnap our children, we're going to be making our own rules. The implications hit Zethkar like a physical blow. If humanity had withdrawn from Federation protections, they were technically no longer bound by galactic law regarding the treatment of other species. They could do whatever they wanted to the hegemony personnel, and there would be no legal recourse available. You can't simply withdraw from galactic civilization, Vextai protested, though his scales were now showing patterns that indicated he was beginning to understand the magnitude of his error. Watch us, Admiral Chen replied simply. The communication array suddenly activated with a priority signal. The face that appeared on the screen was unfamiliar to Zethkar, but the uniform and bearing were unmistakably military. Behind this new human, he could see what appeared to be a massive command center bustling with activity. Admiral Chen, this is Fleet Admiral Harrison. Terra Command has authorized full military response protocols. The hegemony vessel is now in our custody, and we have clear evidence of war crimes against civilian populations. How do you want to proceed? Admiral Chen's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes shifted. What's the status of the children, Admiral? Medical reports indicate they're physically unharmed, but they've been subjected to some kind of neural scanning that our doctors don't recognize. We're keeping them under observation while our xenobiology teams figure out exactly what was done to them. The silence that followed was broken by Vextai, who seemed to finally grasp the situation he had created. Admiral, surely we can reach some kind of diplomatic solution. The hegemony is willing to provide compensation for any misunderstanding. Both human officers turned to look at him with expressions that made Zethkar's survival instincts scream warnings. Misunderstanding? Fleet Admiral Harrison repeated. You kidnap children for medical experiments and you call it a misunderstanding? The research protocols were approved by hegemony scientific standards. Vexatai protested weakly. I don't care what your standards are, Admiral Chen said flatly. You took our children. You frightened them. You performed medical procedures on them without consent. In human terms, Lord Vextai, you just committed acts that we consider worse than murder. Zethkar found his voice, though it came out as barely a whisper. What? What are you going to do? Admiral Chen turned her attention to him, and for a moment he saw something that gave him a tiny spark of hope. When she looked at him, he didn't see the same predatory intensity that she reserved for Vextai. He saw calculation and consideration. Captain Zethkar, our intelligence suggests that you were unaware of Lord Vextai's intentions when you accepted him as a passenger. Is that correct? Completely unaware, Zethkar said quickly. I was hired to provide transportation for what I believed was a standard diplomatic mission. I had no knowledge of any plan to take human specimens. In that case, you and your crew are free to leave our system whenever you choose. We have no quarrel with the Federation or with merchants who conduct honest business. The relief was so intense that Zethkar felt his secondary brain restart. Thank you, Admiral. I wish to formally apologize for my role in bringing this creature to your world. Admiral Chen nodded acknowledgement, then turned back to Vexatai. As for you, Lord Vextai, you present us with an interesting problem. Normally, we would simply execute war criminals who target civilians, but you're the first representative of an advanced galactic civilization that we've encountered who has committed crimes against humanity. Vextai's scales were now cycling through patterns of pure terror. You cannot execute a hegemony lord. The political ramifications would be... Would be what? Fleet Admiral Harrison interrupted. Would your people declare war on us? We're already preparing for that possibility. Would they impose economic sanctions? We were never part of your economy anyway. Would they try to conquer us? The human officer smiled, and Zethkar realized he was seeing the same predatory expression that Admiral Chen had displayed. Lord Vextai, you've made the same mistake that prey species always make when they encounter an apex predator. You assumed that because we look civilized, we've forgotten how to be dangerous. On the tactical display, the true scope of human preparation was becoming clear. Ships were emerging from hiding places throughout the solar system. Weapons platforms that had been disguised as mining stations were revealing their true nature. The asteroid belt itself seemed to be moving, reconfiguring into defensive positions that could turn the entire system into an impregnable fortress. The thing about humans, Admiral Chen said conversationally, is that we never really stopped being the creatures that hunted mammoth with sharp sticks. We just got better tools and learned to work together more effectively. You want to know what happens to people who threaten our children, Lord Vextai? She gestured to the tactical display, where the hegemony research vessel was now completely surrounded by human ships. You get to find out why every other species on Earth learned not to mess with human young. The hard way. Vexitai's communication device suddenly activated with an urgent signal from the cloaked ships he had brought as escort. Lord Vexitai, we are detecting massive human fleet movements throughout the system. Our stealth fields are being penetrated by some kind of scanning technology. We need immediate extraction protocols. Admiral Chen laughed, and the sound sent chills through every being on the bridge. Oh, you mean the other 3 hegemony vessels hiding in our system? We've been tracking them since they arrived. Did you really think you could hide entire starships from people who've spent 50 years learning to detect cloaked vessels? The tactical display updated again, showing the locations of what had been hidden hegemony ships. Each one was now surrounded by human vessels that appeared to have been waiting in ambush for exactly this moment. You see, Lord Vextai, Admiral Chen continued, humans have a particular talent for understanding our enemies. We study you. We learn your weaknesses. We figure out how to kill you efficiently. And then we prepare for the day when you give us a reason to do it. She leaned forward, and when she spoke again, her voice carried the absolute certainty of someone who held all the cards in a deadly game. You gave us that reason when you took our children. Now you get to learn why every species that has ever encountered humanity in warfare has come to regret it. The communication array crackled with reports from throughout the human fleet. The remaining hegemony vessels were surrendering one by one, their crews apparently unwilling to face the overwhelming human response. Within minutes, Lord Vextai's entire expedition was in human custody. So here's what's going to happen, Admiral Chen said as the reports came in. You and your people are going to stand trial for war crimes under human law. The 12 children you kidnapped are going to receive the best medical and psychological care our civilization can provide. And every species in the galaxy is going to learn what happens when someone threatens humanity's young. She paused, studying Vextai's terrified expression with scientific interest. Oh, and Lord Vextai, we're going to make sure that the trial is broadcast to every civilization in known space. We want everyone to understand exactly what kind of species they're dealing with when they encounter humans. Zethkar realized that he was witnessing a turning point in galactic history. The humans weren't just defending themselves. They were sending a message that would echo throughout the galaxy for generations to come. Never threaten human children. Ever.